a model of the President of the United States who calls people names all the time. That's not healthy either. But, you know, negative advertising works. That's why everyone hates it, but it works. And that's why they keep doing it.
Hold on just a minute. Was it in 1832 when the opposition said Andrew Jackson's wife was a keeper of a bordello? Grover Cleveland was accused of fathering captain bastards in New York State. This is not new.
That's right.
No, but it's ugly. And it's all over the place. And I think, you know, one of the things that we're campaigning for is, in the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign and Common Cause and League of Women Voters Together, is to have these dark money groups that are running these ugly ads have to disclose where they're getting their money from. Who's paying for the mud? And so I've been working with Senator Chris Larson from Milwaukee on this. He's introduced a bill that would require that disclosure. I mean, you know, it's one thing to allow them to run the ads. I understand that, though. I think we need to change the law about, you know, letting people just say whatever they want. It's another thing to let them do it and not, you know, the U.S. Supreme Court in Citizens United said disclosure is the answer to letting corporations splatter your screens with mud. Disclose who the money is coming from. They didn't require it, they didn't mandate it.
Not in tiny little unreadable print at the bottom.
Yeah, but we should be able to know who's calling you up
right
and
up there.
giving you a bogus poll question.
There should be disclosure also in the media about a lot of the so-called experts that they have
Right.
coming, you know, who they represent, or this college professor who happens to be under contract to a certain thing for a certain research and blah, blah, blah. And that's, I think the media is
Right.
gotta be.
And you know, they call the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign a liberal group. I'm fine with that, but I want the other groups to identify ideologically as well.
I grew up in Dale Schultz's district, rural or farm, and there was, people were concerned about the Posse Comitatus and the John Birch Society. I mean, there was conservative people who were concerned about this, and I'm not sure where, you know, and the, you know, the thought that they would have voter identification numbers, you know, that was just like a non-starter. They didn't want social security numbers, right? So I'm not sure where, how did we get here?
I don't know how they came back. You know, William Buckley, the editor of the National Review, leader of the conservative movement, basically wrote the John Birch Society out of the Book of Life in about 1965.
Yeah.
But they've come back.
But, yeah, they've come back, but what happened to the, I mean, they're still the same, I mean, there's, you know, what happened to conservatives in Wisconsin? I mean,
Well, there's some, it's interesting, you know, Trump did worse in Waukesha County than Romney did. So there were people in Waukesha County, good, solid country club Republicans, who just could not stomach pulling the lever for Trump, but they then voted for Johnson. So that's why Russ did worse than Hillary, because some of those people either didn't vote at all for president or actually voted for Hillary Clinton, Republicans in Waukesha. So there are some Republicans out there. There are a lot of Republicans who can't really tolerate Trump, but that's why there's kind of a special place in hell for those folks if they're not speaking up, like Paul Ryan. You know, if they're, you know, they don't care if he's a racist and a kind of crypto-fascist and a boor and a sexist pig, as long as he gets rid of the estate tax. I mean, that's ridiculous morality, but that's where we're at.
Well, we've talked a lot about the state and national levels, and I really appreciate your perspective and insights on the state level of things. I think that's really valuable. I just want to bring up that on our local levels, it's very important to be engaging, and that's one place where we don't get this sort of, you know, Democrat-Republican, super polarized divide, and it is much more possible often to talk about, so what are we going to do to make sure everyone's got drinkable water, right? Because that's our job, and we're talking about the basic issues, and I think that certainly Crawford Stewardship Project has found a lot of success in working on basic issues with people of all political stripes at the local level, and I think that's where a lot of this groundswell is gonna have to come from to push the higher levels of government.
I totally agree, and I think
Yeah.
some of the best jobs in politics are mayor and county executive, because you can really have an impact, a direct impact on people's lives, people who you see. And if we've learned anything over the last 6 years, it's how important local elections are. I mean, you know, there are people I know in Madison who are professors and hardcore progressives who didn't know who their local officials were and really weren't interested in who's running for state assembly or state senate, and just voted for president and maybe US Senate. And, you know, as a result, you know, we got a legislature that's very, very retrograde.
Certainly. And on the science front, there's all these, again, top-down things going on. The website's being scrubbed of climate change and everything, and some of the things that we're doing, Crawford Stewardship Project is doing on that front, is we're really pushing the citizen science. We've been trying to push our elected representatives and various other levels of government to do this karst survey for, I don't know, half a decade, something like that, maybe more than that, and finally hustled up some grants and are getting that going ourselves. On November 3rd, we are going to be having our next citizen science event down in Prairie du Chien, where we will be identifying sinkholes, and it's going to be a pizza party as well. So there's flyers for that over there. People are welcome to take them. And we also we coordinate water quality monitoring around some of the largest producers of manure in the county, because those are the most potential for pollution. And and that's actually through the state Water Action Volunteers program. The state is supporting this program, and we are coordinating volunteers at sites of specific concern. We could always use more water quality monitors on the landscape, and just getting this sort of basic data out there is really important, and it's something that is not as debated as things like climate change. But even now, I mean, we've gone to the county a couple times when comprehensive land and water management plans were passed and didn't have any mention of climate change, and brought it up and said, hey, so where's the mention of climate change? And if you avoid talking about human-caused climate change, you can get pretty much everyone to agree anymore that there is climate change happening. At least that one's pretty solid agreement, and there's not too many people denying that unless they have a serious vested interest, like the petroleum companies. So there is definitely progress on the science front, and we're trying to get the information out there as fast as possible, because Kewaunee County was mentioned. We don't want to let our groundwater get to the point where 1 in 3 people don't have drinkable and usable water. Actually, the most recent study done in specific areas they knew were susceptible found that on one single testing, 60% of wells were producing undrinkable water, and they said that if they had done multiple testings, it was quite likely it would have been more like 90%. So pretty much everyone's well in super susceptible areas in Kewaunee County is contaminated at some point during the year when there's lots of manure being spread on the landscape. So getting the basic data and communicating it in a way that is understandable and accessible to people is really key. Because I mean, the climate science is established just as much as really anything is in science, and but what we're finding is these front groups are able to manipulate the conversation with fancy words, and many of the best scientists don't really know how to communicate very well what the actual situation is, and so that's definitely a struggle. But yeah, like we were talking about, if we can prevent our movement from getting siloed and can try to connect all the issues and try to reach out to those who see things differently from us. I've talked to people who fly Confederate flags, and to most people, that means freedom, and it means freedom from overreach of oppressive higher level governments and local control, which I'm all about and is super important. So, you know, you can find those, and some people don't even know or have squashed that they know that it's a racist symbol to some people, and they don't really think of it that way, and they don't think of themselves as racist, and, you know, maybe they need a little educating on that front, but maybe that's not as important as understanding how to protect our water and have an inclusive conversation with everyone. So, yeah, if there's other questions or things that people wanted to say before we wrap up, there's just a time for maybe a couple more things, and then I want to point everyone to, there's a donation bucket over there on the table, and this is a free and open event because we just want to make all our events accessible to everyone. But Crawford Stewardship Project and Wisconsin Democracy Campaign will be splitting the pot, so if anyone
And we're
wants
tax
to-
deductible, so if you wanna send a check in tomorrow, that's cool too.
Yep, yeah.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to say that where we live, one of the great things is there are so many groups doing such good work. And that's, I think, one of the strengths that we have here. Individuals and groups on different events. Like you mentioned, people work on things in different ways, and being reminded of the racial issues, for example, and how that also connects to environmental.
And it is just important to work together when, I mean, odd as it seems, the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign and Common Cause that Wisconsin used to fight, and I just thought, that's ridiculous, we're working on the same issues, let's forget about that and
And
move on.
just different
Yeah, and so-
ways of going about it.
Yeah, and so we're all working together now, and it's great,
Good.
and I think that's important, so. About front groups, there's a new front group, corporate front group on water that came out in the last week that we posted at our website at wisdc.org. It was, you know, some Alliance for Clean Water or something. Well, the Alliance for Clean Water is headed up by someone from Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce, the president of the Paper Council, the head lawyer for Milk Source, the big dairy farm, biggest dairy farm in Wisconsin. So that's how much they want to protect our water. But yeah, you gotta be careful of these folks. So actually, the group was quoted in the paper the other day too, without identifying, you know, exactly who they were. So that's how pernicious it can be.
Alright, well, I wanna thank everyone for coming, thanks again, Matt, and, looks like there's still some.
Gives me hope to hear about your good work.
Well, thanks, you know, it gives me hope to hear about all your
And
good
there's
work.
tons
too.
of information on his website.
There's a lot of good stuff
but
going on,
They're
so.
posting things like every day, and there's cookies and brownies left still.
Great
and
homemade
coffee,
chocolate chip cookie.
yeah.
Save me one.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm doing well. How about you?
Yeah. Better.